I think that creativity and writing can be spiritual practices, and they can even be modalities for healing. Because what we do is we look within ourselves and we kind of excavate the inner world, and we find emotions and energy that might be stuck, and then we shed the light of awareness into them, and then we purge them out onto the page.
James McCrae,
poet, author, and creativity coach known for his work on mindfulness and self-expression.
He wrote Shut Your Ego Says and The Art of You.
McCrae explores the intersection of creativity, intuition, and emotional growth.
I read today that there are almost 1 million words in the English language. So if you're a writer, how do you know which of those 1 million words to write down onto a page? It's like you're navigating the unknown, and you're really using your intuition to guide you word by word.
How do you stay connected to your intuition? Do you have periods of time where you feel less connected? Do you ever feel, man, I've gotten really disconnected from the muse? All right, James McCrae, welcome to the Creative Path Podcast. It's good to see you, man.
Hey, Adam. Great to see you. Thanks for having me on.
You're very welcome. And congratulations on the book. Let me pull it up. The Art of You, right here. This is your third book.
Yeah.
I haven't even put out my first yet. So congratulations. I'm impressed.
Thank you. You know, I just can't help but write. Like that is just that's my spiritual practice.
Mm-hmm.
That's my meditation. Like I write every morning, and I just feel like not writing in the morning for me would be like not brushing my teeth.
Mm-hmm.
I need like a good 2 or 3 hours just to be alone with my journal.
So for people who aren't familiar with your work, because I have questions I want to dive right into with that. Do you consider yourself, how do you consider yourself? Do you consider yourself a writer, a meme artist, a poet? Like how do you introduce yourself?
Yeah, you know, I've had a creative path that has taken many directions, and I've done many things creatively throughout my life, but writing has always been my home base. And particularly poetry. So I do think like in my heart of hearts, deep down, I am a poet. You know, I started writing poetry when I was like 14. And by the time I graduated high school, I had a stack of notebooks filled with poetry. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I stopped for a while. I got into advertising, and I was a brand strategist in New York City for a number of years. I was a graphic designer for a while. I was a painter for a while. But writing is just always what I go back to. Just like, I love playing around with language and shaping words. So I do a lot of things. I make memes. I write poetry, but just writing is where I feel most at home.
Okay. So if you had to take on a label, it would be writer.
Yes.
Okay. So tell me about your writing practice. It is something that it sounds like you do for hours every single morning. Mm-hmm. Do you have a ritual that gets you into it? Like what happens from wake up? Take me into it.
Yeah, great question. I really do make my creative practice a ritual or even a ceremony because, like I said, I think that creativity and writing can be spiritual practices, and they can even be modalities for healing, because what we do is we look within ourselves and we kind of excavate the inner world, and we find emotions and energy that might be stuck, and then we shed the light of awareness into them, and then we purge them out onto the page. So that's more or less my practice. I start every morning with 10 minutes of meditation just to kind of clear the head and kind of get in the zone. And then I make a big pot of yerba mate tea. And I have a notebook. I like to write with a notebook. I think typing on a computer doesn't have the same organic flow as just like your wrist and the pen and the paper. Mm-hmm. So I always do it in a notebook. And it depends on what I'm working on, but I really try to sense like what's trying to come through me, you know, and some days that might be a poem, some days that might be a newsletter or that even applies to my business. Like if I'm working on an online course or something, I put that same creative process to like putting the course together as I do with writing a poem, which is just like, I'm a big believer in channeling the muse. Like, I think that our best ideas come from beyond us, beyond the conscious ego mind. So I do my best, play some instrumental music, light some Palo Santo, have my notebook, and just really try to channel my own inner oracle or my higher self through my writing.
What time are you waking up? What time are you writing generally?
First thing in the morning, I get up around 8 or 9. I've got a baby now, so I get maybe a little. The sleep schedule is a little more, random. But I like to write first thing in the morning because I think that's when our channels are most open. Once I've got a meeting to do or a phone call or a podcast, it's hard to get back into that open channel. So I try to get as much of my creative idea generation work done first thing in the morning. And then there's a lot of writing and creativity that doesn't need to be as much channeled. Like, you need to edit. I need to type it up into a computer. So I'll do more of that busy work, or making the Instagram content or making the meme off of what I wrote in the morning. I'll do some of that more production work, busy work in the afternoon when I don't have to have as clear of a channel.
Got it. And so is that time with your partner, is that time do not disturb me time in the morning?
Yes.
Do they now do not come in to your writing space?
Yes. She will say that I'm very grumpy in the morning. And that might be true, but I think mostly I'm just kind of in the zone, and I'll go out to in the kitchen to grab something, and I'm just trying to be quiet and not get into conversation because I'm still contemplating something in the back of my head. So yes, we have an understanding where it's that's kind of my sacred space in a way. She does qigong in the afternoon, and I give her space for that. And I do my writing in the morning, and she gives me space for that.
And it's generally 2 to 3 hours. So you're waking up around 8 and you're in there until 11, 12 every day.
Yep.
Great. And that's 7 days a week, not Monday through Friday. That is 7 days.
Yeah. Because that's what I love to do. It's good to take breaks. It's good to give yourself time to reset and relax and restore your energy. But for me, writing is what gives me energy. I enjoy it. I want to do it. And so it's very disciplined, but also not, because it's disciplined in the sense that I show up every day to write, but I don't give myself a strict word count to follow. I think that making art, writing, it's very much like giving birth, where you can't just give birth whenever, right? Something needs to gestate within yourself, and you need to plant the seed and cultivate that, and eventually it's going to be ready to be born. So not everything's ready to be born all the time. So, if I sit there for 2 hours, but I only get one paragraph finished that I'm happy with, I'm okay with that, because that's all that needed to come out of me that day.
So that's really interesting. Do you differentiate between writing, because what you said was a paragraph I'm happy with. So there's writing, and to be happy with it means there's some sort of goal. You're going to be putting it out. It's a part of a book. It's a part of a newsletter or a meme. Versus journaling. Do you differentiate between the two, or is it all one for you?
That's a good question. I used to do more classic journaling, where I'm just kind of dumping my subconscious mind onto the page. Now I do so much of my work in public, with sharing, with Instagram, with newsletters, with talks, that I try to channel that energy into something that can be shared. But sometimes it takes some rough drafts, or just playing around with an idea, or jotting down. I'm more jotting down insights, and then maybe they'll find their way into a book, maybe they won't. But I try to make things that can be shared.
And you're on actual paper. I recently got a Remarkable tablet.
Yes, I've been looking at those.
So because I'm a paper and pen guy.
Yep.
And there's actually something that was really interesting that was told to me, where based on how you went to school, So your early learning days, the somatics of how you learned. So for us, we were writing
We were.
pen to paper, pencil to paper.
We were.
And so the actual somatic act of doing that activates a learning centers in our brain in a way that kids today are growing up with these electronic devices or keyboards or whatever way more. And so they don't have the same
Yeah.
relationship to writing with the hand. And in many ways, it might be detrimental to try and write with the hand for them because they grew up so much on the keyboard.
Yeah.
And so I love actual notebooks. And recently, just within the last 3 weeks, went over to a Remarkable tablet because I want to be able to go back and find things. And I'm about to work on my book, and I am going to fly to Europe with over 30 journals, a box of 30 journals so that I can go through them and finding things. And it's just difficult. So I've switched over recently, and it's kind of the balance point of being able to somatically write while take advantage of the convenience of the electronic. Have you thought about?
I have. I've seen they've advertised to me, and I've seen them, and I think I might try it at some point. Because I'm very, I think when you're writing in a notebook, I have to be very organized. So I'll end up at some point during a week kind of typing up all the things that I wrote that week in a notebook. So there is like this process of bringing it into digital, and then I have like organized, note documents for some things, and then Google Docs for some things. So I've got to really categorize the things that I write, and I kind of do that on a regular basis just so I don't have a backlog of things that are lost in journals that I'm not going to be able to find later.
What I appreciate about this conversation so far is I'm getting to see how, one, disciplined, but also structured you are. Because what you're saying is, okay, I write, I have my routine, what comes through completely free flow, but like with goal now. And then every week, at the end of the week, I'm typing things up and I'm organizing them. Were you always structured like that? Because there's a general idea a lot of times that an artist is chaotic.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious how you got to that place where you've had that discipline and structure.
Sure. There's a few things come to mind. I think artists can be messy and chaotic, but I think it just depends on the person. Some people say like, art is messy. When you're writing art, when you're writing something, it's messy. You're just kind of like, and it is true to a degree, you're just kind of dumping your thoughts onto the page. But I'm also like a student of, traditions like Zen Buddhism. So I value simplicity. So rather than dumping out like a page worth of thoughts onto a page, what I try to do is really sit with an idea or a thought until it becomes more clear. And then I don't write it down until I kind of have a crystallized idea. One of my writing mentors is the poet Allen Ginsberg. And I was reading a book of his interviews, and someone asked him, do you polish your poems after you write them? Do you go back and edit them? And he thought about it, and he said, no, I don't really polish my poems. What I try to do is polish my mind, and I just attune myself to my deep awareness, and I don't write until like there is a clear idea. So I try to write in more clear, concise bits. And also, like, I went to college for graphic design, and we were taught, your digital data and your files are very important. If you lose your files, like they said in design school, like if it doesn't exist in 3 places, it doesn't exist. Because you can easily like, something could happen to your Dropbox, something could happen to your notebook, something could happen to your hard drive. So I'm obsessive about backing things up and having, digital copies, things stored in hard drives. So I'm a bit of obsessive when it comes to like just categorizing and sorting my ideas, because with as a writer, your words are your currency. So I just try to like make sure I have them all available and a backlog of them that can be accessible.
Yeah, and I imagine also the ideas further marinate and integrate into your being, because not only did you give it the space to write it the first time, but now you're transferring it and you're writing it a second time.
That's true.
And so
That's
there's a deepening that's happening with these ideas. So with my poetry writing, I actually relate to the Allen Ginsberg thing, where if you looked at most of my poetry, it is not scribbles and things like that. It's very rare that you see a poem of mine written that isn't coming through and written down finished. And it's funny, I had Ali Michelle on this podcast, and she says if you were to look at her poetry journal, it's arrows and lines and it's just all over the place. And for me, that's happening in my head.
Yes.
And especially because so much of my poetry is meant to be spoken.
Yes.
Has a rhyme, has a cadence. If you were to look at me writing, you'd see me bouncing my head, you'd see me mouthing words, you'd see me moving my body almost like I'm dancing, because I'm finding the right cadence, I'm finding the right words, I'm finding the right rhyme scheme all in my head, and then I'll feel it. I'll go, there it is. And that's when I'll write it.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that, because that's one thing that about your poetry that I love so much, is that it has that cadence to it. It's got a rhythm to it. So I was wondering, like, do you have like a beat playing? Are you almost like, do you have to find the beat or the rhythm first, and then the words will kind of follow the rhythm?
Well, I can't play music while I'm writing poetry.
None.
Because the beat will inform the poem.
You want to find the beat inside
Correct.
yourself.
Because suddenly, because now I'm making music.
Yeah.
Like I'm writing a song.
Yeah.
If there's a beat playing. So while writing poetry, I can't have music playing.
But you have an internal kind of beat or metric that you're following.
Yeah. And there will be so many times that I am moving my body. So I've realized I've recently got into dance. I really love to dance. I've always loved to dance, but I just did a 2-week psychosomatic dance immersion. And when I started making music, I don't know if you know this, I have some music on Spotify. When I started making hip hop style music, I didn't know how to produce music. And I don't really know, I play the guitar, but I don't know how to play many other instruments. But I would communicate to my producer with my body. So I would say, hey, the music is doing this right now, and I need it to do this.
Yeah.
And for people listening, that I'm like swaying versus going up and down very staccato like. And he would understand how to translate that. And so I've always felt rhythm in my body very deeply. And so while writing poetry, I'm paying attention to my body. And so as I'm saying the words, suddenly I'll do that. You saw what just happened. That tells me that there's a change in cadence that the poem wants.
Yes.
Like my body is informing what the poem wants. There's a communication with the muse, as if literally I'm dancing with the muse to a song that I am trying to capture. And that's sort of my process, and allowing my body to inform where it's going, less than intellectually trying to figure out where the poem goes.
I love that. I totally agree. I feel like as a writer, there's like a feeling I want a sentence to have rather than like the logical construction of words. And it's more like there's like a little internal beat to writing, at least like poetic writing, whether even in a book, where I'm trying to like follow a rhythm more so than logically construct a sentence.
And that's the part where when you create in that way, it is more of you. Right? Because I grew up listening to rap, hip hop. I love that. And so the cadence that my body naturally has that.
Yeah.
And that is different than someone who didn't grow up listening to rap at all. Their internal cadence of what their body would want to move to is probably a bit different.
Yeah.
And so when we incorporate our body in, and our body's our unconscious mind, right? So much can emerge.
Yes, I really think that writing should breathe. There should be like a breath to it, like a natural breath that's expressed. Like I feel like there's a lot of great Instagram poets, but a lot of them I feel like they're holding their breath. I feel like it's like a little bit frozen, and I think that poetry, especially, it comes from an oral tradition. And I think your poetry follows that oral tradition where there's a rhyme, but a story, and the rhyming just helps articulate the story and hit different points. So I love the association of writing and dance and having a rhythm and a flow and a breath to it. It should be alive. Language is a rhythmic format.
And so mentioning Instagram, I really want to understand, because you, from my understanding, really blew up with memes on Instagram.
That's true.
And yeah, that's really like it took off. And you're one of the few, I consider you a meme artist because you're making them and everyone else is taking them, but you're making them.
That's right.
And you have meme school where like you teach people this process in this world of Instagram where it's a love-hate at times. It's become its own type of art.
Yes.
Right? It's its own thing. How did you get into meme writing, and how seriously do you take it as an art form?
Sure. Well, I think memes are as legitimate as an art form as anything else. The format of art and writing is always changing, right? Like there was, cave paintings, and then they found oil paints, and then there was oil paintings in the Renaissance, and then there's Andy Warhol, who's using silk screens to make his canvases. So technology is always informing art, and I think that art is always made with the common tools and technology of any time. And, the common tools and technology of our time are the internet and social media. So I think it's only natural that an art form would emerge from the internet or from something like Instagram. And I think that it is, people complain about it or say it's not real art because, it's such a fleeting format. Like people are scrolling and they're just like half paying attention. And, but I compare it to, I compare memes and internet content to microdosing art. Like if you read a novel or if you listen to a whole album from someone, that's like taking a macrodose of art. You're like fully immersed in it and you're living with it for a while. But if you're on social media and you're scrolling, you're still like giving someone a transmission, but it's more in like quick little doses. So like if you follow someone on Instagram for 3 years and every day you're getting a tiny little hit of their insight or wisdom or writing, over 3 years, you're actually making a big impact on that person. So I think it is, I do take it seriously as an art form. It's just consumed in a different way. So I started making memes. What happened was I was pitching a book to a publisher and it was a novel. It was like, I was known as a nonfiction writer and I was pitching a novel and no one wanted to pick it up.
How long ago was this?
2020.
Okay.
And I was really frustrated because I'd spent so much time working on this book. And the thing with writing a book is I have all these words in a Google Doc that no one has ever seen. And I put all of my creative energy into this document that's still private. And I want to get it out there. So I'm like, well, how can I control the means of distribution of my own work? And then I thought about social media and I was like, well, what if I actually treat my social media content with the same level of seriousness that I would into writing a book? And I put that same creativity into daily social media content. And at the time I was listening to a lot of Terrence McKenna lectures on YouTube. And I came across one where he was talking about memes. And this was like in the 80s or early 90s. And I'm like, well, why is Terrence McKenna talking about memes in the 80s and 90s? I thought that was like an internet thing. But it turns out that the word for what the word meme actually means is it's like the smallest unit of an idea that can be spread. It's kind of like a viral idea that can kind of seep into the culture. And I realized that internet memes are a way to almost take a big idea, but then you distill it into its essence. And then by adding the image and maybe a sense of humor, it becomes more impactful. So, you can stand up and give a lecture or write an essay on something, and you might, some people will agree with it, some people won't, but it doesn't have the ability to cut through the clutter like a meme does, where I feel like it almost like bypasses your intellect and it hits you in the gut. So I just discovered a way to, share spiritual ideas, just different thoughts into a new format, and just played around with that as my own artistic medium.
Do you have a different approach to creating memes than you do writing? Is it a separate? Do you structure your day where those first 2-3 hours is writing for newsletters, your book, etc., and then there's a different time for meme creation?
So my meme process is the same as my like poetry process. The difference might be I might be inspired by an image that I saw, and I'm like, this would make a great meme. So if I'm making a meme, I'm still writing, but I'm kind of looking at the image for inspiration, and I'm thinking about what is this image trying to say, or what is my voice expressed through this image. So it's almost like I'm meditating on the image. So, until I think of what it wants to say, and then I write out different ideas.
So I'm curious, do you intentionally set aside time to go and scroll the internet for images?
It's very organic, because I think just like a lot of people, I spend a lot of time scrolling social media, whether I'm like waiting in line at a coffee shop or whatever. Mm-hmm. So I've gotten in the habit of when I find something that I find inspiring, again, I'm very organized, so I screenshot it, upload it to Pinterest for later. I've got a Pinterest board with hundreds of what I call meme templates. So if I ever want an idea for a meme, I can just go into my template folder, and I've got hundreds to choose from.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And this, how do you balance social media then? Because I am trying my best to be off of social media as much as possible, because for me, I find that I actually never feel better on the other side of like a 30-minute doom scroll session. I really don't. It's a noticeable difference where I go, I feel worse. And there's times where I go, I'm feeling so bad right now, and I can't stop. And I keep going, and I'm just paying more attention to the addiction elements. And as a big period of time I'm in right now is lifestyle design. I'm looking at, what do I want my days to look like? What do I want my weeks, my months, my years to actually look like on a very tangible level? And how I'm building out my team, and just hired an assistant, et cetera, so I can be on digital devices less and less and less. And when I hear you talk about what you're doing, how you're doing it, when I see your memes and the amount of just images you find where I go, I don't even know where you're finding those. I'm curious your relationship to social media itself.
Yeah, it's a good question. It's definitely can be a toxic environment. I just try to find the inspiration there. I think that for me, I think of my Instagram page as, my art gallery. So I'm always like looking for inspiration, whether it's reading other people's writing or looking at really obscure esoteric meme pages. So when I'm using social media, I try to use it to gather inspiration. and ideas and to find images and to see where the pulse of the culture is at. I think as a writer and as a meme artist, I think it's really important to have your finger on the pulse of the culture, because you could post something that's in your head, but if it's not related to what the collective mood is, it might not resonate.
That's very interesting, because what I've been thinking about with my own writing is my poetry is riding a wave of emotion. Generally, there's a very strong emotional charge, and the words are my way of surfing that wave. And that's different than poems I've written, like Plandemic and these other ones that I've written in the past, where this is what I'm observing going on collectively, and I'm commenting on that.
Yes.
And it's less about my own personal emotion versus my last Spotify album, The Journey Back to You, was all relationship stuff. So there's a difference to it. And I think that when I speak about lifestyle design, a big part of what I'm looking at now is, okay, the more fully I can live life to the extremes of emotion, like the more I can be in that space, the more fodder I have for the poetry I want to write, versus when I'm scrolling, I am on that pulse, but it doesn't inspire art in me in the same way.
Yeah. I think it can work both ways. I do think that it's important to start with emotion. I think that our emotions have access to a more subtle intelligence than the mind is capable of accessing. And I think that emotion connects us. Like, if you look really deep within yourself to see how you're feeling deep down, you're reaching deep within yourself. And that's the only way to connect deeply with others, is to connect deeply with yourself. Because, our experiences might be different from person to person, but we all know how it feels to have heartbreak, or to feel lonely, or to have loss, or to grieve, or to be frustrated. So I do think that it's important to connect with your own emotions and write from that place. And I think that there's, also the collective emotions as well, where it's not like commenting on what people are saying, but like what is, like the world is crazy and there's different shootings every day and different wars happening all around the world. So just seeing where people are at with everything, I think just helps me reflect on my own emotions and like what is my voice in this whole cultural conversation that we're all having.
And how do you balance the business of it? That side of, okay, I'm expressing what's true for me, and all of you've just spoken to, if it's 3 hours a day, 7 days a week, that's 21 hours a week of writing. Then you have whatever happens in the second part of your day, which, transferring that writing into digital form, busy work, as you called it, all of that, the actual meme creations themselves. It's a full-time job.
Yes.
And so there's a lot of people listening to this right now that are saying, well, I have a writing practice and I have these things and I do these things, but I'm not making any money from it.
Yes.
Tell me a bit about how it became a business for you.
Well, I come from a background of working in the advertising world, at first as a graphic designer, and then for a number of years as a brand strategist.
Me too, by the way. I don't know if you know that.
Yeah. So, I worked on Madison Avenue at a ad agency for like 8 years. So, when it came time to like start my own business, it's like, well, what do I know how to do? What am I good at? And I think you can only teach what you know and what you've experienced. So, in brand strategy, I was always making presentations because I had a design background. I was like the go-to guy to put together presentations. So I was making strategy decks, presenting them. and got a lot of training in speaking to clients and sharing my ideas and thinking critically about a brand and coming up with messaging for them. So I'm like, okay, well, how can I apply my professional background to, working for myself as an artist? And it led really naturally into, teaching what I do, teaching writing, teaching content creation, helping people find their voice and, go public with their message. So, as a teacher of writing, coming up with my curriculum is part of my writing practice. So if I'm going to launch a course, I have a new, creativity branding course that I'm launching soon. I also have a course about how to make memes.
And these are DIY courses?
They're both. I do DIY courses, but I also have group classes that I bring people through as a group.
Okay.
And I also do one-on-one, coaching to help people express their inner artist and create content and really create a brand out of their own creativity and message. So I weave in the creation of my business around even my writing practice. So it's like, okay, what do I have to teach? What is a good class about how to cultivate your intuition? And I'll sort of write out the class structure the same way that I write my poetry. I just kind of tune into the muse, like what do I have to say on this topic? And I just let that flow through. And, I structure my classes similar to how I put together my poetry. And then I've got so much experience, putting together presentations and telling stories visually that, I put together beautiful decks to walk people through. So I try to make the business stuff as creative as possible, so it's easier for me and more fun for me to do. There's still, a lot of the back end stuff that's not as fun.
Do you have a team?
I do not.
It's all you.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. I have a hard time delegating. I'm kind of a perfectionist in some ways, where I have a hard time like letting go of control of certain things, which I think is common for writers, because I think often writers are writers because they are perfectionists in some way, and that's the one thing they can control. It's like when you're writing something, it's like you have full authority over what you're writing. So I think it gives a good outlet to people who want to control something.
And the cool thing is it allows you to stay in the zone of the writer creative in a lot of ways, even though you have to do some of the back end.
Yeah.
And what I mean is, so I have a team of 7, and what I have spent the last 2 years very focused on is becoming a better business owner.
Yes.
Becoming a better leader for my team, understanding business better, understanding the actual mechanics of building a business versus being a solopreneur that I was for so long, and hiring maybe a freelancer for something versus now, okay, how do I have culture? This person's not getting along with this person for some reason. There's a conflict. How do I navigate that? And what do I need to understand in order to scale something? These are all just like anything else. It's a skill set that I didn't have. And it was a rude awakening to go, wow, I don't know how to actually build a business very well. I've been able to have a great living as a coach and solopreneur and artist, where I make my thing, I hire a freelance editor or whatever, and it's good. But if I want to go to the next level in business, I need to learn business. And so I've spent basically 2 years highly focused on that, and I'm coming back around. So I'm now going, okay, dues paid over here. Now I know enough to know what I want to do, what I don't want to do, and I can adjust. And with the writing of my book happening later this year, that is me re-entering back into where I started, which is project-based artistry.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Being an entrepreneur is the most creative thing that you can do, because every day presents new challenges. And the creative process is a lot like life or starting a business. Like when you start, you don't know exactly what steps you have to take to get there. Like if I'm writing, like I read today that there are almost 1 million words in English language. So if you're a writer, how do you know which of those 1 million words to write down onto a page? It's like you're navigating the unknown, and you're really using your intuition to guide you word by word. And I think that you can learn so much from that creative process. And creativity teaches us to trust ourselves and to trust and to navigate the unknown. And that is so helpful in business because, yeah, starting a business from scratch, I did not know what I was doing either. I was just winging it. That's the same thing when you're writing a poem for the first time. You're just winging it. And then you wing it once, and then something worked, something didn't. You can improve on it. But starting a business is such a journey into the unknown that requires creativity. So I totally agree with that.
So what are your goals? So where's the balance between the creative expression that is consistently the foundation there to do you set business goals for yourself? Do you set, I want to make this amount of money, for example?
I do, yeah. And I balance the, and first of all, I think that there's seasons for, let's say there's seasons for poetry and there's seasons for business, right? There's a time to just be in your flow and in your intuition, and there's a time to, really just do the hard work, push through things, push through obstacles, figure out how to, do new things. So I, and the way I balance my creative practice with my business is I feel like I want to make my business accessible to everyone. So the more content I put out, I feel like I'm just building a relationship with people. I rather have like low ticket offerings that are accessible to more people. So the content, it's also promotion for your business. So I see it as, even if I'm writing a poem, I'm, you're connecting with people. So then when you're selling something, they're kind of already paying attention. So the creativity becomes marketing for the business when they're aligned in that kind of a way.
How do you stay connected to your intuition? Do you have periods of time where you feel less connected? Do you ever feel, man, I've gotten really disconnected from the muse?
Yeah, I would say so. I think life happens, life brings us all sorts of chaos and challenges that
you had a baby
that kind of distract us. Oh my goodness, that's been the biggest, thing to navigate is just spending, but like sleep schedule's messed up. Like and I want to spend time with my baby, and I want to give my wife a break. So, yeah, it's hard to find like creative intuition when you're, changing diapers every hour. But I think that just cultivating stillness is just really the way to do it. As much as you can. I think mindfulness practices can take a lot of different forms, whether it's meditation, going for a walk in nature, even like listening to a really good album. Reading, I try to maybe read a poem or two every morning as well, just to, just consume things that I find inspiring. So just finding little pockets here and there to have time for quiet contemplation, that goes a long way. And like, I think that the relationship with the muse is like any other relationship. It requires time and dedication. So even if it's 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there, I try to cultivate presence and stillness and contemplation, so I can be receptive to that voice.
And do you feel fully fulfilled with your practices, or do you have, let me rephrase the question, because for me, there are so many things that really deeply interest me. And a lot of them are very physically demanding. So dance right now is a big thing for me. I, in the past, was really into jujitsu and mixed martial arts. There's a physical thing that I've realized for me is incredibly important for my optimal state. And so creativity for me is an expression that comes out from the state that I'm in. And I find that when I'm in optimal state, the expression is just better. There's more energy, there's more excitement, there's more to pull from. And so I've been looking at what are the elements that really support me in being in that optimal state. One of them is actually routine. And I've been nomadic for 7 years, and routine is very difficult to find when you're only in places for a week to 2. And so the transition from lifestyle design now has me looking at, okay, the time of nomadicism is
like
right.
One of the million words in there.
One of the million words. That time is coming to a close because I'm about to enter into a transition from business mind into much more artist again. And taking what I've learned and applying it. And I need routine for that. There's an optimal. And so my question for you is the way that you've designed everything seems very routine. There's a lot of structure, discipline, and routine to it. Do you have a part of you that's conflicted? Is there a part of you that wants to be traveling a lot more or taking up different hobbies? Or are you in your Dharma so heavily that you go, no, this is what I would do and how I would do it for the next decade?
It's a great question. You know, I have never always been a routine person. I like to just, go with the flow. I feel like I like how you said in your Dharma, because I've been writing about this idea of Dharma and just being in your true nature and doing what comes most naturally to you and where you can make the biggest impact. So I'm kind of in a period where I am kind of hunkered down, especially with my new baby, where it's like I'm not doing a lot of traveling and things like that, and I have a lot of routine. But that is what's grounding me to my practice. And I feel like to be great at anything, you need to do it almost ritualistically. Like I've been reading the book Zen in the Art of Archery, which is a book about someone who took up archery and really discovered Zen Buddhism through archery, and how, instead of meditating, he saw archery as the pathway to, you can say, enlightenment or whatever the Buddhists, call it. And there's this Zen phrase that's chop wood, carry water. And it means like if you're a Zen monk, you're living in this little monastery, and someone asked his master, how does one reach enlightenment? And the master just said, chop wood, carry water. And it's like doing those mundane things, but doing them with a deep awareness and intention, and finding that ritual within your practice. So even if I'm doing the same thing every day, that's kind of the art of refinement, where it's like, for life or for creativity, just to achieve that level of mastery, and even like the Buddhist idea of enlightenment, it's not some big eureka moment that you chase after. It is the refinement day by day, little by little of your practice, and going deeper into deeper awareness with it and deepening that relationship with it. And then there's no big aha moment when you reach this grand conclusion. It's just the result of refinement over the course of day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year. And then you look back and you can see like how far you've come.
And that speaks to what I take from that is less about the same thing over and over again, because I think of the book Mastery by Robert Greene. Have you read that book?
I have not. I'm familiar with his work, but I haven't read that one.
So what the book more or less covers is all of these people who became seen as masters in their field.
Mm-hmm.
But the common thread among masters in their field is that they innovated. So they were seen as masters because of the innovation they brought to the field. And that innovation actually came because they had divergent paths where they had done this thing for so long, but then they diverged into arenas oftentimes that people went, what are you doing? That doesn't make any sense. Why are you doing that? But then whatever it was over here, when they eventually would come back, and as I'm saying this, I'm like, wait, I'm kind of doing this. I feel excited. But they would come back, and what they gained from this field over here that none of their peers had taken the time to study now led them to a way of thinking that allowed for innovation and just a whole different way of coming back to the old thing. But where it aligns with what you're saying is I see the thread where each and every one of these people goes all in on the thing. So no matter what it was they were doing the first time around, all in. And then when they did the divergent path, all in. And then when they came back, all in. And they're bringing 100% of themselves to the thing that's in front of them, the chop wood, carry water.
Yeah. Can I read something really quick from this?
Yeah, of course.
This is just a little page that I think that you just inspired.
From the book, The Art of You by James McCrae.
Because I agree. I think it's so important to go out and experience life and to gather experiences that you can bring back into your art.
Mm-hmm.
This is a little page it's called Say Yes to Adventure.
Okay.
Before an artist can make good art, they must go out and experience life. Before a writer can write, they need something to write about. It's not enough to know facts. You must know feelings, fear and forgiveness and hate and salvation and everything in between. Some things you can't learn in books or podcasts or documentaries. You have to walk through the fire and burn away your bias and illusions. Say yes to the adventure of life. Find out what you're capable of. Get lost. Go dancing. Look the devil in the eye. Fall in love. Get your heart broken. Move to a place you've never been before. Feel happiness so deep it makes you cry. Learn to laugh at your sorrow. And once you have traveled and learned and loved and lost, go back home and make your art. You will know what to say, and it will be true.
Okay, so I love that. And let's dissect it a bit.
Yeah.
Because we are both saying that. We're
Yes.
both saying that same thing. And yet we both are coming at it from two different angles, actually. I'm 7 years nomadic, peak experiences all over the world, like dating and trying new workshops and retreats and plant medicines and et cetera, et cetera. And you are in deep routine, ritual, relationship, baby, business. There's all of that. So I could see where we say, well, you can find that in anything. You can find the emotional depth in obviously becoming a father, being in a romantic partnership, having routine. And you could find it traveling the world and not having that. But I agree, you have to live life,
Right.
to have something to express.
Well, I would not be as fulfilled being as grounded as I am now with a baby and my, morning writing practice, etc. I would not be as fulfilled doing that now if I had not already spent decades traveling and having a variety of different experiences.
Got it.
So I think that's very important. I think it's important before settling down to go out and have as many experiences as possible.
Got it. Okay.
And trying new things and experimenting and failing and exploring that's been most of my life.
How old are you now?
42.
42. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm 39.
Yeah.
And so when did you settle down? When did you stop that lifestyle?
I mean, with it 2 months ago when my baby was born, or, I got married last year.
Okay.
But, I think it's so important. Like I've always been, I think it's so important to experiment with life and not to just take whatever template you're given.
So you were very experimenty with life for the first 40 years.
I moved all over the world. Like I'm from a very small town in rural Minnesota. I grew up in the middle of nowhere. There was like a few hundred people in this little town that I grew up in. There were no artists, there were no poets, and I had to break out of that and like go on my own life adventure. And I dropped out of college and just traveled around the country working odd jobs when I was like 20, while working on my poetry and painting at night. I eventually went to school for graphic design, but I got bored with that and I switched to brand strategy, and people were like, you can't be a brand strategist, you're a designer. But I'm like, I'm going to try it out. I had to learn a whole new skill set, moved to New York City, had a whole New York City, experience, all kinds of adventures. And I'm like blogging on the side, and then I'm like found poetry again. And then I agree with Robert Greene that to innovate, you need to have divergent experiences, and then you kind of bring them all together in a new way. So whatever you want to do, you can't just follow the template. You need to like go off on your own journey, gather experiences, truly just live life to the fullest so you can bring new experiences and new insights into whatever you're doing. Mm-hmm. And I'm a big believer in experimenting and trying new things and failing and then learning from it and then reinventing yourself. And we're always just reinventing ourselves. I think to be an artist, you have to be willing to change. You have to be willing to leave behind the person you used to be and step into a higher version of yourself. And I think to do that, you really have to move around. Not everyone in the world has the opportunity to move around, but if you're always in the same situation that you grew up in, it's really hard to change because people have certain opinions of you, expectations of you. They see you a certain way, but deep down you might see yourself differently or know that you have more to give and have more to share. You really have to break those old habits and routines in order to, do something random and experience new different things that will help you become who you want to be.
I don't know anyone massively inspiring or like super interesting that was born, raised, lived, and died in the same place.
Absolutely.
I don't know. Like when I think of all the most interesting people really throughout history, throughout my friend group, the people that I meet, that I'm exposed to, they are people who have and they don't have to be well-traveled necessarily, but at some point in time, they left the nest.
Yes.
And I think that this is one of the things I really appreciate about Europeans, because Europe is so easy to traverse. A lot of them do the travel thing for a year after they graduate, and they go, yeah, I'm just going to go here, here, here. And while it is all European, it still is very different. Like there's very different culture in Italy versus in Germany.
Yeah.
It's a very different thing.
Yes.
And I feel that one of the most impactful things about traveling is it humbles you in helping you see that how you view the world is a tiny fraction of how the world is. You just have an experience and you go, wow, this is so different than anything I've ever experienced, that my idea of what the world actually is, there's no choice but I have to let go of the idea that I even know.
Yes. We're all born with preconceptions and biases in a certain area, and those need to be challenged. And it's just like challenging your ego. Be like, I know, I have it all figured out. Like, I know everything. It's like, actually, you don't. There's like, the world is way more vast than any of us know. So the more we can expose ourselves to that, it challenges our preconceptions about the world. It forces us to dig deeper inside of ourselves. And yeah, moving around is so useful.
So you'll just get a kick out of this story. I was an actor in Los Angeles, and a friend of mine had the pleasure to sit down and have a conversation with Christian Bale. Christian Bale is one of my favorite actors. I in terms of the actual craft of acting,
Sure.
I look up to him so much. And she asked him, what would your advice be for a new actor? And he said, go live life.
Yes.
Go live life. Go learn how to ride motorcycles. Go learn how to scuba dive. Go have crazy adventures. He said, because all of that becomes who you are, and who you are is what people are interested in.
Yes.
And so when you look at, did you read Matthew McConaughey's book?
No.
So Matthew McConaughey's book, Greenlight, I recommend listening to it because he actually narrates it. You find out that he's lived one of the most interesting lives. He's so fascinating in how he's lived his life and the adventures he's had, including tribal wrestling in the middle of Africa with like the African champion from the local village, crazy things he's found himself in. And now you get it. You get why when you watch him on screen, there's something about him. There's a charisma that he brings. And what is charisma? Charisma is not just confidence, because that's just confidence. What is charisma? Charisma is something that draws you in, that makes you go, I want to know more about this person. And I think that can't be faked. That is just, you're an interesting human. And that draws me in. And so it was interesting to hear Christian Bale say the best thing you could do as a young actor is live an interesting life. And I think that's what we're speaking to, is if you want to be an artist or a creative, the craft, yes, but ultimately the craft, whether it's acting, writing, poetry, etc., the craft will be the medium through which you express your soul. And your soul is the thing that you can make more interesting through how you live your life.
Yes. Yeah, I think that I like this comparison of sculpting. So every statue, every sculpture began as this like unpolished block of stone, just like a big, ugly block of stone. And the sculptor doesn't actually make anything. The sculptor just removes all the parts of the sculpture that are not part of the statue. And it's an act of chiseling away at what is unnecessary. And I think that when we experience life, that's what we do. We kind of chisel away the parts of ourselves, the biases, the ego, that are the block of stone that allows us to become like the sculpture that's within it. And I talk about how I don't believe in writer's block, because I think that how creativity works is like, I call it creative hunting and gathering. We go out into the world and we gather inspiration and insights from all the things that we do. And the more experiences we have, the more we're just packing our energy, our subconscious with information and data to work from. And I think instinct is something that, to a degree, instinct is something we're born with. But I think the more data points that we work with just sharpens our instinct. Like, so for example, like look at an NFL quarterback. And if you're a rookie, they call it rookie mistakes, because you're a little bit nervous. You don't quite know what to do, but the more reps you have out there, the more that once you've been playing for years, you've kind of experienced every situation, and your instinct automatically knows what to do. So I think it's so important to go out and collect information and data to work with to help sharpen your own instinct. So I think writer's block is often you're just in your own head too much. Like if you're if you are just sitting in your room writing day after day and then you feel stuck, well, it's because you haven't filled your cup with enough information, data, experiences, emotions to pull from.
I relate to that through poetry writing, where there are some poems where I know as I'm writing it, I hit a point and I go, oh, Muse is gone.
Yeah.
It's actually, and in that moment, I know that either I don't have the life in me, the life experience to finish it, or I'm not in the right energetic. Maybe what I've been writing is from a place of deep sadness, but where the poem wants to go, I can't be writing from a space of sadness. And so I just need to wait until I've moved through it, and then I come back to it in a few days from a different space, and now I know where the poem wants to go. And so learning to listen and dance with the muse and recognizing that writer's block, or that block there, is something that oftentimes is just, hey, you're not in the right space, whether you need more experience or a shift in energy to finish it.
Absolutely.
And I'm curious, do you know the difference? Because I think that's a skill, to be able to spot, hey, this is the time I just need to sit with this poem where I'm frustrated, I don't know where it goes, but I know that I'm meant to sit with this for a while longer, versus Muse has left the building. This is not the time for me to sit with this. This is the time for me to let it go, and I'll come back to it.
No, I completely agree. Yeah, I think that if it doesn't, writing is not always easy, but you can kind of sense whether your emotions or your energy are pregnant with something to say or not.
Mm-hmm.
And if something is trying to come out of you, then I do recommend sitting with it, and don't force the writing, but sit with the feeling, sit with your emotion until the right words come out. There's a time to kind of push through if you feel like there's still something inside of you that wants to be expressed.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know the words yet, but you know that something's trying to come out. Then sit with it and kind of contemplate it and maybe try to keep going, even if you don't know the right words yet. But I agree. I think sometimes, it's spent, like the energy is spent, the muse has left the building. Then you could do anything. Even getting up to dance could help. Go for a run, listen to a podcast, do anything to just kind of get your head out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And whatever. I think that when the muse is funny and like the universe is funny, because if you sit with a question, you'll often find signs and oracles that will point you to the right direction. I have a friend, she wrote the foreword to my book, Layla Dahlia. I was speaking to her about writing, and she says if she doesn't quite know what to write, she'll even like put on the radio or put on the TV and just quietly in the background. But she says inevitably a word will be spoken on the radio or on TV that will trigger something in her. So I think that if you sit with a question and then you take it with you on your day, go for a run, whatever, that insight will come through. You'll see something, you'll think of something that will answer your question.
I think that's brilliant. I love that, because now you're in communication with the universe.
Exactly.
You're saying, hey, like I could use a clue.
Signs are everywhere when we're tuned into them.
Mm-hmm.
When we're tuned into our own awareness and we're actually like contemplating something, signs could happen. You might say something that will inspire something that I was thinking about before, or I've walked by strangers on the street who are having a conversation that gave me a word or an idea that I needed for a project. Mm-hmm. I think it's so important that like we live in a field of information, and when we know how to attune ourselves to a question that we're seeking guidance for, that the signs and the oracles could come from anywhere.
And so I'm going to land us a little bit as we come into the final few questions here. And I lead a program called the Artistic Entrepreneur, and it's based off of a path that I believe we can walk to create a business around our passion. And there's these specific steps that I want to ask you about and see your relationship to them.
Yeah.
The first one being the core conflict, identifying a core conflict, because I think that we don't ever graduate from that conflict. It is the thing that we continue to find ourselves in as the curriculum of this lifetime for ourselves. And that's why it's a core conflict. It's the lens through which we grow through that resistance. Mine, at many points in time in life, has been this fight inside myself between my inner artist and my inner entrepreneur. And there's a core conflict of wanting to be successful and do these things versus the part of me that just wants to be loved for just my pure expression. And I'm curious if you have a core conflict that consistently shows up for you that you have battled with in your career.
Well, what comes to mind is just the existential crisis of being human.
Okay.
Just trying to navigate what it means to be alive and like, what are we here for? And how to navigate a world of cruelty and chaos and control as the sovereign artist within us. That's definitely a big part of it.
Great. That's a great answer.
It's a big weighty one, but that's why I write like existential memes. I'm trying to crack a joke at the
absurdity of the human experience.
The human condition. Yeah.
You do a great job of it. And so then once we have an eye on the core conflict, we go into the practicalities of actually, let's build a life around this. Let's build a business around this. And it starts for me with what I call a 100% certainty offer. The thing that I know with 100% certainty that the right person taking that, I can change their life. What is that for you?
In terms of what?
What do you have certainty around as your offer to this world?
Yes. Well, it has to do with living the life as an artist, but also directing your artistry in a purposeful way. Because I have been an artist for my whole life, and I haven't always been able to monetize it. I've spent many years as a starving artist, painting or writing poetry. And but I learned to commit to that practice and really that life of being an artist. But then finding a way to bring your purpose to the public and to really express your message and to, for lack of a better word, to brand yourself in the world. Because I think that we all are projecting some kind of an image into the world, whether we realize it or not. Often we're projecting our images, just subconsciously and reacting to what's happening around us. So I think it's so important for artists, especially if they want to, monetize their creativity in some way, is to purposefully show up in a way that is going to be aligned with their inner purpose, but also make an impact in the world. So really that intersection of being an artist, being a creative, having that vision of a poet, but showing up in a way where you're being of service and you're actually making impact with your work.
And what would your advice be between, or maybe there's a balance between going all in on the artistry versus day job artistry in the free time?
So I had to balance that for a long time. I wrote my first 2 books while working full time at an advertising agency. So, and that can be a lot to balance, but I think it's so important to love the creative process. Because I would wake up early and write my first book before going to the office. Then I'd come back home in the evening after, working all day and write some more. And it's because I wanted to do it. It was like a safe place for me. It was like a place where I had, unfiltered creativity to play around with. So it's so important to really love that creative process where you can't help but do it and find, if it's not fun, it's going to be a chore and you're not going to make time for it. So finding a way to really have fun with it and enjoy it and make it like a sandbox for your own exploration rather than just like another thing on your calendar.
Great. Yeah. And so once you know what it is that your offering is, you have to, and you alluded to this, present it. And so for me, that step is about crafting signature content, like really some items, some pieces that really capture the essence of who you are. And so for you, how did you really find your voice? How did you craft that signature content that became James McCrae?
Yeah, I mean, it's always evolving, and I think that's okay. But I agree. I sit with this a lot. Is like what, because I look at Instagram and like look at the content that goes viral and the people that are blowing up online. They are people that have a signature style that they can kind of tap back into, and they also don't have to reinvent the wheel with every piece of content because they have that signature style. So, it's really comes down to message and aesthetic. Like, what is the message that you want to put out into the world? And even like pretend that you have like a billboard in LA that 1 million people are going to drive by every single year. What is your message on that billboard? And write out like 10 different billboards with your quick little messages just to help refine, what it is you want to say. And then, social media is a visual medium as well. So it's important to have the right format, the right branding, whether it's handwritten text or something that's colorful or more minimal. What is the natural visual expression to complement your message, and really combining those into some kind of a simple template that can be essentially reproduced.
And so from there, the next step that I see is you build a relationship with your audience.
Yes.
And you've done a really great job of that. Can you
Yes.
speak to your approach to building actual relationship with your audience online?
It just kind of happened. But looking back, I think it's, we all have like a tribe of people that resonate with our work. And when I'm tuning into my muse in the morning, I feel like I'm often trying to channel the collective or my segment of the collective. So I'm almost trying to give voice to something that we're all feeling. I'm trying to hit on not just what I'm feeling, but what is the human experience that we're all trying to navigate together. And I try to write things in a way that people will resonate with. And I don't try to force it. I think that, just like you can't really, choose your friends. Like some people are going to resonate with you, some people are not. But I think that the more you can put your authentic self out there, and that's the only way to find your authentic community.
And so there's an interesting balance there, because I often say that I write my poetry for me.
Yeah.
I share, and once I've shared, it's yours. Do
Yes.
what you want, say what you want about it. But I write for me. And it sounds like you are writing for you, but you are considering actually everyone else in the art you're creating.
So I do in the sense that I think that, if you're writing, there's going to be a reader. I mean, that's just the nature of if you have words, someone's going to be reading them. I just try to be considerate and like think of things that are going to be, I don't know, have some kind of a point. I think of what I'm writing as, I really like the art of the sutra, which is like they're almost like a sutra. I think social media content are sutras, because a sutra is like a little piece of wisdom. But the Vedic word for sutra actually means pearl. And it's about stringing together different pearls into a necklace. And like the collection of the teachings is the collection of sutras. So yes, I write them for myself because it's a lesson that I'm learning, but I'm also trying to, be a teacher and be transmit messages that are going to resonate with people. I mean, sometimes I'll write a poem that is just for me, but I try to at least leave something behind that's valuable that people can, find some kind of insight or inspiration with. So I don't like compromise my work to make it more appealing towards people, but I do want it to be accessible for people and simple and clear, and something that, it helps me, but it could potentially be of service to others as well.
That's beautiful. And so then the last stage is, once you've done all this, now it's about building the monetization ecosystem.
That's right.
And you have no team. It's just you, which is unique, really, in a lot of ways. And so for anyone listening to this, in terms of wanting to take their creative expression and be able to earn a living doing it, what would be your piece of advice?
So I think that, there used to be this saying that those who can do, those who can't do, teach. And it was kind of like a slight on teachers, where I think that we live in a decentralized world now where teaching is actually very important. I think the universities aren't doing what they used to do. The institutions around us are not providing the same level of service to society as they once were. So I think it's important for everyone to step up into a leadership position into some area, whatever that is. Mm-hmm. So where are you qualified to teach and lead? And that's going to be based on your life experiences. What unique life experiences have you had that have taught you certain lessons that make you an expert in even a little area? Like, I think we're all experts at something. And if we're not, we can learn those skills. What are you called to learn more of? So finding what you're truly qualified to teach and where you're qualified to lead, and then step up into that and to teach.
I love that.
Yeah.
And it comes back to live your life, like live an interesting life, and you're going to find that along the way.
Absolutely.
Well, James, this has been amazing. Thank you for dropping in and having this conversation to let people into the creative path that you've walked, the creative process that you have, because it's obviously impacting so many people. Your new book, The Art of You, is out. I'm so excited to have a copy. I've heard such great things. Let people know how they can find you, get your book, get more of what you do, your meme magic. And
well, my Instagram is Words Are Vibrations. And if you go to the link in my bio, you can buy my books. You can check out my classes. I've got a class where you can learn to make memes, as well as a branding course. So all the link in my bio will have all the good stuff.
Epic. And is there anything else that you want to leave listeners and watchers with before we wrap up?
No, it's great to see you. It's great to have you visiting Austin, and I'm looking forward to seeing your book when it's finished.
Yeah, God willing. Well, thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for listening to this episode of the Creative Path Podcast. And if you've gotten some value from this, please pay it forward by sharing it out. Tag myself, tag James on social media. We love seeing what your biggest takeaways were so that we know that this conversation actually has a ripple of impact. I appreciate you all so much and want to remind you that always, in all ways, you are seen, you are heard, and you are loved. Have a blessed day, family. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really appreciate you taking the time. If you are interested in building a life that you love through the 3 pillars of relationship, business, and creativity, then I encourage you to continue checking out more of my content, including this video, which I really think that you will like.